I can't think of a better song to lead into our sermon series for Lent, Making Sense of the Cross. This is our fourth Sunday of looking at the cross and trying to make sense of it for our lives today. Last week we began looking at some of the theological theories of atonement. And in our time together last Sunday, we talked about the classical theories of ransom and victory. These were the most prominent theories for the first 1,000 years of Christianity. Those theories seemed to satisfy Christians up through the Middle Ages when a new concept was put forth. And this new concept that came around about 1100, between 1050 and 1100, sticks with many of us still today. And that's the theory of atonement through substitution, satisfaction, and sacrifice. I dare say that that's what most of us were raised with. At least I know I was. And most of us still cling dearly to that theory today. As I said last week, each of the theories of atonement begs us to ask 4 questions. What is broken, or what's the problem? 2, what is needed to fix or correct the problem or brokenness? 3rd, what kind of God is at work in and through the cross? And 4th, what understanding of the Christian life does that theory of atonement offer to us as Christians today? As I mentioned earlier, the classical theory of ransom and victory held the highest place of honor for 1,000 years. But there were some people, when the Middle Ages rolled around, who had issues with the idea of God negotiating with Satan or tricking Satan. For those folks, it seemed below God's honor for those kind of interactions to even happen. But if you're a student of history like I am, we know that the Middle Ages brought incredible turmoil to the Christian church. As a matter of fact, it brought turmoil to the whole of society. All of a sudden we had a feudal system. We had lords and royalty, commoners and peasants. Up until the Middle Ages, there was only one Christian church. There was no Protestant Reformation now. It hadn't taken place, but it was on the horizon. And it was during this time that a theologian named Anselm rose to power as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he made a name for himself with some of his writings, as well as his authority with kings and monarchs. This time that we're talking about in history is a time in which kings and monarchs ruled the world, and yet the church, even then, was in a constant struggle to remain relevant and to remain authoritative. There were also the beginnings of rumblings in the church itself over the power that it exerted over people's lives and the requirements that it made on them. During the Middle Ages, the power structure that everyone lived on and lived in was based on a class system. You had the upper crust, the royalty, and you had the rest of us, the peasants and commoners. In this world that Anselm lived in, kings protected the peasants. They had their kingdoms. They walled it off or had their armies to guard it. They protected the peasants who lived on their land. And in return, the peasants owed their loyalty and their obedience to the king. For their entire well-being and their safety depended on the king's benevolence. So it's within that mindset that Anselm drew the comparison of humanity's relationship to God, and he proposed that God is this divine and cosmic king, and we, as human beings, are the commoners or the peasants. And as commoners or peasants, we owe our loyalty and our obedience to this king. We owe it to him by simply being commoners and peasants. Now, you know, that doesn't sound too off the wall for most Christians, because we still believe that we owe our allegiance and our loyalty, our love to God, who is our King. Anselm, though, had a medieval view of what a king was. And in those days of knights and kings and King Arthur and the Round Table and all this stuff that was going on, the number one priority was honor. I don't know if you remember the tales of King Arthur, if you read those as a kid or have read them before. But there's a point in which Lady Guinevere, King Arthur's wife, and Sir Lancelot have an affair. And the king's honor is besmirched. And he loves both of them dearly. Lancelot is his favorite knight. Guinevere is the love of his life. Yet, justice had to be done. That's the time in which Anselm was living. Now, Anselm didn't really have an issue with the classical theory of ransom and victory as long as it remained symbolic in explaining the importance of the cross. But for him, those two theories were inadequate to explain the meaning of the cross. The classical theory could not explain why the cross had to happen. So Anselm's big question was, why the cross? He wanted to know why God had to become human and die on a cross. It all seemed so beneath God's honor to do that. To Anselm, because God is king, he rightfully deserved all the respect and loyalty and allegiance and obedience of his creation, even Satan. So from Anselm's point of view, we ask our first question, what's broken? What's the problem? His answer is this: because of sin, we have not given God the honor that he deserves. We have not given him our loyalty, our obedience, and our allegiance. And not only have we sinned and not given God the honor that he is due, we have no way to make it right. We can never repay the debt of honor that we owe. Because we are a sinful people incapable of living a sinless life and giving God the honor that he rightfully deserves, there is nothing that we can do as human beings or commoners or peasants or however you want to look at it to repay the debt of honor that we owe to God. Basically, he thought if we already owe everything to God as our king, because he owns our land, he owns our lives, he owns our taxes, he owns our money, he provides our food and our security, he already has everything of ours, what could we possibly give that he doesn't already own? So there's nothing that we can do to make up for this debt of honor. There's no way to restore moral order or to ever be righteous enough to be in God's presence. In a nutshell, humanity has not given God the honor that he deserves, and there's no way for humanity to repay this debt. As it turns out, in Anselm's way of thinking, only God could possibly pay God back. Okay, so why doesn't God just pay himself back, forgive us, and be done with it? Well, that brings up the concept of one of God's most enduring and sometimes frightening attributes. God is a just God. The rules of justice demand some kind of payment. God created not only the universe, but he also created the rules that govern the universe, and if the law of honor has been broken, there are only two ways that the debt can be paid. either through satisfaction, meaning we pay back the debt. We've already said we don't have anything left to pay that debt back with, or death. Those are our two options. We're bankrupt, so we can't pay the debt back, so we're faced with death. Because disloyalty to the king means death. And if a king just goes around handing out forgiveness for every debt, why would anybody bother to obey him? It didn't matter what you did if you disobeyed the king's rules, and he forgave every one of them, no one would obey him in the first place. And what if the king were to forgive some people's debts, but not others? Would that be fair and just?
Yeah.
I believe there's a parable in the New Testament about that, isn't there? To Anselm, because God is the king, God must demand justice either by satisfaction or death. And that's where Jesus comes in. Because Jesus is fully God, Jesus can pay back the debt to God. And because Jesus is fully human, that payment can count as the satisfaction of our debt. Jesus, as God's own Son, as we know from Scripture, was perfectly obedient, sinless, gave God complete honor. And out of his devotion to the Father, Jesus renders complete honor by going to the cross and dying. A man who had done absolutely nothing wrong was put to death so that we might live.
Amen.
Through his death, the honor that was due to God was restored and the debt has been satisfied. And not only that, there was enough honor left over to cover the rest of humanity. Only because Jesus was fully human could our debt of honor be repaid. In other words, God can't simply pay our debt. It just wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be just. But Jesus, as a human, can pay back the debt for us. So that answers our second question about how the problem or the brokenness is fixed. Jesus is sent by God to pay the debt that we can't. Now, if the story ended there, everything would be neat and tidy. But after Anselm's death, two other theologians took his formula and tweaked it a little bit. During this turbulent time of church history, the emphasis on God's honor shifted to God's justice. Two theologians of the time, Thomas Aquinas and John Calvin, championed the idea that God's honor was secondary to God's justice. Now, while Anselm believed that Jesus' obedience to the cross was what was involved, Thomas Aquinas and John Calvin felt there must be punishment involved for the debt of honor to be restored. It wasn't a matter of honor being restored through obedience. It was a matter of honor being restored due to punishment or through punishment. According to Thomas Aquinas, Jesus was only punished for original sin, and every human being thereafter was responsible for his own sins through confession and penance. Now, Thomas is responsible for the system of confession and penance and absolution that's found in the Catholic Church and a lot of the other Orthodox churches that still practice that today. But then a couple of 100 years later, along comes a young upstart named Martin Luther. And he had a young contemporary by the name of John Calvin. John Calvin was also a reformer. And John Calvin put this theory out there. He says, Jesus didn't die just for original sin. He died for all sin. We don't need to do penance. And like most early leaders of the Protestant Reformation, Calvin believed that we are all completely